So when I was little, the first word I ever said was pretty. And that was because my mother incessantly took me outside to the park and pointed to flowers and said pretty. So it was just echoing the first word that I heard the most in my life. But as I got a little bit older, I wasn't a great sleeper. And I was really complaining to my grandmother. I think I was probably 7 or 8 about having bad dreams and what should I do about this, and I need to sleep better. And maybe I was 10, but in my head, I was very young and my grandmother was very old, which I could be a grandmother, so she probably wasn't that old. But she says to me about this experience when I was little and saying pretty and how I loved flowers. And she said, what if when you were going to sleep, you collected as many flowers as you possibly could in a garden full of flowers, and then you got to pick whatever colors you wanted, how you wanted to arrange them, if you wanted to carry them in a basket or if you wanted to wrap them in a blanket. And maybe a blanket isn't logically correct, but that is an activity that I have done, not so much as an adult now, but throughout periods of my life that felt particularly stressful. And I will say college was difficult for me in terms of sleep, which I'm sure it is for a lot of you. And that method of falling asleep was something that I used pretty readily. Closing my eyes and imagining a flower garden. Often it looks like the tulip field in The Wizard of Oz. And really being particular about selecting and arranging these flowers. And I'm not really sure I ever got a big bouquet because I would fall asleep pretty quickly after starting to imagine this. I want to frame that anecdote in terms of thinking about how we have hope when our anxiety or our panic or our situation in life is such that it inhibits the ability to think of something good in the future. Now, I know having bad dreams or not having good sleep is not really an earth-shattering activity, although when it's habitual, it can actually be very problematic in terms of our highest level of functioning, and it can be indicative of having a trauma history. But my example is not robust enough to be extrapolated or connected to that. What it can serve for you is kind of an analogy about things that we can do when we don't have access to hope itself. When a situation feels particularly hopeless, or when we feel helpless, what little thing can we do that can start to encourage us to experience hope? Now, let me backtrack just a little bit to my logic or my thoughts about creating this video. I have an earlier piece on hope. And I had my students in my scripture and trauma class watch the video and respond to it. Getting their feedback helped me think a little bit differently about hope. So let me give you some structure and articulate the problems that they identified with the video. And not a problem per se, but something to be aware of. When we have trauma in our lives, when we have pretty intense suffering, there is theoretically a set of stages that we go through in the process of recovery. Now, these stages aren't linear, it's really messy, but Judith Herman does some work on the theory to help us understand the different stages. They are safety, remembrance and mourning, and reconnection. She has recently wrote a book about justice that's like a 4th stage. When I did the prior hope video, I really located hope within the stage of reconnection. I didn't even realize I was doing it until my students watched the video and critiqued it based on learning the stages of recovery through Judith Herman's work. So they said that I presumed that the person experiencing hope as an action, as I put it, had access to agency, relationships, and really structures of support that enabled them to be further along in the process of recovery of trauma. So I started to think about what happens then if we're at this earlier stage. What happens if we're really anxious? What happens if we're in the panic? Where is hope? How do we think about hope? How do we conceive of it? How do we create a pathway in our lives where hope can actually continue to grow. In this conceptualization of hope, I think the best way to think about it probably is that there is something better that we can move towards, or an experience of our lives that's not characterized by anxiety or panic. And, I'm thinking in my mind right now, if you're a college-age student, there's like, oh, well, we have break. After we finish with all of our exams, we're going to go home and relax for a minute. I'm not thinking about it exactly like that. What I mean is that in the moment of the anxiety, we have relief, real relief, not because we envision what's going to happen in 3 weeks, but because we can get access to the experience of otherness in the panic or anxiety. So if you go back to my analogy, I can't sleep, but in the act of picking a flower, something happens in my body and I calm down. That's hopefulness, right? That there is possibility of getting out of any moment where there is suffering, and that we have that possibility in us. Let's think about the first stage of trauma recovery. It is conceptualized in Herman's terms in what's called safety. External safety and internal safety. So what I want to do is frame hope as an agential or an action-oriented word that has something to do with our interior capacity to act and make a difference in real time in our own anxiety, panic, or let's say triggering moment from trauma. That we have this hope as an action in us. What that would mean is that we take some kind of control or mastery of our internal lives and our external lives, which have some characteristic or affiliation with threat, danger, fear, panic. Let's say you have some kind of trauma history or not, and you're in a situation where someone is aggressive to you sexually, and that just really throws you off. It might destroy your day. It might destroy your week. You might not sleep for a week. It depends on the level at which what happened or the level of history you bring into the exchange. So what do? Where is hope there? How do we get out of this feeling of fragmentation or panic? First thing, there has to be a recreation of the feeling of safety. Externally, don't be around that person. If you can't, you have to think about strategies that create some kind of boundary to protect you in some way from that person. That can be imagined or actual. The second piece is internal safety, which means there is something going on within you that throws you off in terms of your homeostasis, or what we call in psychology regulation, that has to be addressed so that you have the capacity to take care of that external environment, create the boundary, get away from the situation in a way that protects you. If we talk about safety, we need to think about safety in two different areas: external safety and internal safety. So let's think about the strategy my grandmother gave me in relationship to having anxiety about sleeping. In the act of imagining collecting the flowers, that happens to feel externally very safe for the characters in the movie. And immediately when I set myself in a field of flowers in nature with the sun, I imagine some very nice temperature, I have created external safety. Now, presumably I'm in an external environment that is safe, right? My bed. But I may not feel that way. So this is an imaginative exercise that allows me to create the external safety I need to start to calm my body down. So that's the relationship, right? External safety, that is a situation where all needs are being met in the external environment, and then the ability to self-soothe, to self-regulate, to calm my system down, that's the internal safety. So in terms of creating our ability to have action and hope, we really need external safety and internal safety. External safety can be being with your friends, being with family members that you trust, or anybody that you trust. External safety can mean creating a sense of comfort yourself on your couch with a fluffy blanket or a weighted blanket. That's external safety. Eliminating any kind of environmental factors that feel dangerous. Some of us live in big cities. Some of us walk around in situations that may feel more or less safe. What can we do to enhance our external safety in those environments? I'm from New York City, so I keep my phone in my pocket. I might pay attention and not wear my earphones when I'm at the subway. So those are ways of increasing my external safety, even when there's some kind of threat. And the threat may be bigger or lesser degrees depending on where you are. But it's something to think about. I mean, if you're walking around the streets at night, you want to think about ways you can enhance your external safety. Don't have something in your ears so that you can hear what's going around. A good place to connect external safety and internal safety is the thought of covering yourself with a really nice soft blanket, or if you have a weighted blanket. What happens in that creation of external safety enables our neurological system to calm down. That facilitates self-soothing or regulation, which equates to internal safety. So one of the things we have to master is this idea of self-soothing. When I teach this in class, I show an image of a baby with a pacifier sitting in a seat-belted car seat with a blanket on, and the baby's sleeping. That baby is regulated. That baby is both externally safe, evident of the seatbelt and the car seat, and internally safe. That baby's sleeping soundly. That means that baby is not hyper aroused or anxious or panicked. That is a real safe child. So in our imagination, how do we create that internal safety? It is all about regulation. It is all about taking a look at what's happening around us, creating external safety, and then learning how to soothe ourselves. We can do that through food, really nurturing ourselves with the way that we eat. You might do that through exercise. So maybe there's a particular day where you feel stressed and you can take a short run and something changes in your body and you feel more calm. That's internal regulation. That's internal safety. It may mean that you imagine something beautiful, the way I did with picking flowers, that calms your nervous system down so you can sleep. Really, it's anything you can do to soothe yourself. It may be petting your cat or petting your dog or playing with your dog, because that sort of creates some balance in you internally. So basically, then, if we're at this stage of recovery where we're thinking about safety and trying to think about how that's aligned with hope, when hope is connected to our ability to act. So really anything that helps us take care of ourselves, soothe ourselves, regulate ourselves, connects us to hope.